My name is Richard Pepperman. I've been a film editor for over 55 years. I teach at the School of Visual Arts, Art of Editing, and I teach story structure. There are three techniques that are quite familiar to film editors and audiences alike: parallel editing, cross-cutting, and intercutting. And I would define the three very, very distinctly. Parallel editing is where we move from characters or time, even an era, a different space, and in each case, the scene that precedes and proceeds the changes is completed in their dramatic structure. A good example of that would be The French Connection. We go from Marseille to Brooklyn, back to Marseille, back to Brooklyn. It also automatically indicates to the audience that no doubt these characters are going to come together somehow. In Atlantic City, we go from Atlantic City to Philadelphia, back to Atlantic City, and the characters we saw in Philadelphia have arrived in Atlantic City.
I don't want you here. Get your asses out of here.
One other frequent occurrence is that there is some connection, some link. In The French Connection, it is an undercover detective in Marseille following some suspects. And when we go to Brooklyn, we have two New York City detectives undercover setting up surveillance of a local saloon. In Atlantic City, we have Lou, played by Burt Lancaster, looking out a window to Susan Sarandon, Sally, who is washing with lemons. And we get to Philadelphia, we have Susan Sarandon, Sally's ex-husband, surreptitiously watching a telephone booth to observe a drug drop-off. That then he steals the drugs and makes his way to Atlantic City. That's typical parallel editing. There is a link, not always, but the classic use, there is a link, but it always is a completed dramatic structure before we move to the next location, characters, time. Cross-cutting is where that's not the necessary result of the structure. That is, we simply are in a moment, in a particular scene, a particular place with particular characters, and then we go to another particular place, another particular scene, particular characters. There is not necessarily, and frequently there is, no completion, conclusion, resolution to the dramatic structure. That's often overused to kind of add a little bit of snap to what the editor or director or producer begins feeling is somewhat too dull to hold an audience's attention. So the cross-cutting is back and forth. It's almost like a very badly done soap opera where you have so many characters that no moment can possibly get boring because we're not there too long and we get to somebody else. Intercutting is simply that the director has furnished a series of shots for a scene, and the editor cuts back and forth and back again with the scene. I think a great example of using all three is the opening of the film Serpico, where they use parallel editing and intercutting and cross-cutting. We have this scraggly guy in a beard sitting in the back of a car and his face is covered in blood, and it turns out that he's an undercover policeman. We go to the 8th precinct, and it turns out when they learn that Serpico's been shot, we learn that a policeman might have done it. And then we go to someone being awakened in bed. That person turns out to be a commissioner for the Knapp Commission, which was investigating police corruption. He's getting called by somebody from the New York Times that Serpico's been shot. And then we go back to the police car. That film, which was directed by Sidney Lumet, was edited by Dee Dee Allen, one of, I think, the most influential film editors. She said the film was made soon after the events of Frank Serpico's life, most especially his testimony before the Knapp Commission. It was structured in the chronology of the script and the chronology of the events because everybody knew, they assumed, everybody would know what had occurred and therefore would just lay out Serpico's life in the police department chronologically. And one of the last screenings before they were going ahead and have the negative cutter begin work, have post-production sound begun, she said, we all looked at each other, we knew something is wrong. as best she could describe it, there was an energy about the film that just no longer seemed to be there. And so she asked if they would give her, I think it was 3 weeks, it may have been 2 weeks, for her to just look at the film over and over again to see if she could determine what it was. She took the leader off of each of the reels so that the projectionist would have no idea what reel goes first, second, third, etc. And she just told the projectionist, let's look at the film, don't worry what reel you put up. And she looked at the film for 2 to 3 weeks in any order. And what she found was this new opening. And it was, let's not assume the audience knows anything. And so the film begins with, who is this scraggly guy with a bloody face in a car? Oh, he's in a police car. He's a policeman. A policeman might have shot him. The New York Times knows who this policeman is. And that was the urgency that I think she found that led to this structure, which I think also speaks to the malleability of film structure and how information can be distributed in far more unique, never before realized ways, rather than trying to force a film into what you assume.